How can you use the PIOS to dramatically change your life in 1 year? That is the promise that I'm trying to give people when it comes to the PIOS system, which is the Polymath Integration Operating System that I created, a framework for polymathic people, but even if you're a specialist, it'll work for you as well. I just wanted to have a system that could work if you had multiple different things going on that you needed to focus on. So the way that the system works, as opposed to like the para method and stuff like that, is more time-based. It's more yearly to daily. And while I go into that in much more detail in other videos, I wanted to get more into the nitty-gritty of like why and what are you doing in each layer that I wanted to kind of go into today. So if you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe and comment down below if you have questions about this, especially after the video. If something was left unsaid, maybe I can make another video based off your comment. So that'd be great. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen here. Simple little visuals today, but on the yearly plan. Now, this is Obsidian. If you're not used to it, that is okay. Obsidian can seem somewhat overwhelming at first, but most of the time, it is actually just a matter of kind of getting used to it. It's actually not really as complicated as Notion, if you would believe it. And so my system here works by having a database that I plan my content, and I also have a to-do list, and this is basically just a glorified to-do list. I have my daily notes, weekly notes, monthly notes, quarterly notes, and yearly notes, and then I also just have my normal file type over here. And so you can ignore all these plugins that don't really matter right now. What matters is that on the yearly plan, you are doing a basically macro overview, and that's what's really important here. When you're doing this macro overview, you are focused on being able to understand what is going on in the holistic term of the year. And I think a lot of people realize that mentally, but they don't know what it means when it comes to actually going into it. So I'm not going to show my templates today. I probably should have pulled those out, but I think that's probably better for another video another day. And I also have a video basically just about that I released like last month. So I would actually just go recommend checking that out, and I go through each layer individually. This time is a little bit more practical, like what are you doing in each one and how you want to actually improve your life quickly. That's the key point there, quickly. Not just using the system, but try to make dramatic change in 1 year. And so this macro overview is very important. It's even kind of supra too, if you want to get like into the scale. But being able to plan ahead is based on what data you have in the year prior. And so the yearly notes are kind of interesting. They're the only ones where you're actually messing around with 2 notes every New Year's. So you're going to be doing the review of 2025 and preview of 2026. And because of that, you're kind of going back and forth a little bit, but that's okay because you want to have all your data about that year in one place. And so otherwise, if you're doing both in one place, it would actually be kind of like awkward how it positions itself in the note itself. So at the end of the year, you need to review what are you doing right now? What have you done last month? What have you done the last quarter? And what did you do all year? And what did you succeed and or fail to do in the year? And that is a great starting point for when you're planning the next part of the year. And I think that I just want to touch on that real quick. It's interesting to think about when people are doing yearly reviews, they kind of think about it in the corporate sense. But what about in the personal sense? And having the documentation of what you're doing each year. So there's an important part of the yearly note where you actually just write down what happened this year. And honestly, if I had AI to kind of help me transcribe it, it'd be better, or like voice to text might be better. I probably could get a dictation tool, and technically Windows has one built in. It's not that good, but that would be a little bit better. But I just sit down and write out what happened the whole year. And honestly, it'd be way better if you just did it throughout the year. And so technically speaking, I do that in the monthly notes, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So it's good to review those monthly notes. And one thing I've been trying to do more is jump between the layers more often. And I'll explain that in the next layer here in a second, actually, because it's very fitting. But being able to jump back and forth allows you to understand what happened in the meantime while you're still looking holistically. So when you're looking holistically, you jump down to the quarterly, maybe even monthly notes, and just see what's going on from a glance. And then you go back to the yearly note and do your planning. Conversely, you can actually go from the other way around as well. And we'll get to that here in a second. So the next area is the quarterly notes. Now, the quarterly note is interesting because, honestly, it's one of the ones I've been the weakest at, but I've actually seen the most progress when I actually work on those more often. So it's kind of interesting there. There's a concept called the 12-week year. It's a good book. Go read that. But you don't have to necessarily read it to understand the concept of instead of 12 months, you have 12 weeks. And then those 12 weeks, that becomes your little year. People often overestimate what they can do in a month, but they underestimate what they can do in a year. But imagine if you had 4 years within that year. And basically, you're maximizing the amount of output you can do within that year by planning a 12-week year. Because if you try to do everything month to month, I know I've tried myself, then you're just going to burn out, or you're just going to fail at doing a lot of those different things. If you want to try to do that from a quarterly planning point of view, and so you're kind of working your ways down, like, what do I want to get done this year? Well, what can I get done within a quarter? And if I can accelerate that within a month, great. If I can't, at least you're getting it done within the quarter. And that's the type of mindset you need to have when you're doing that. And so quarterly notes are actually still kind of in that holistic pattern. There's 5 different layers there. The first 2 are going to be much more macro. The bottom 2 are going to be much more micro. And then you get to the monthly, and it's kind of a mix. And so the alignment check is literally just that. It's just making sure you are aligned with what you are trying to do. So your body, mind, spirit, and emotions, as well as your ikigai. And that is just simply what you are doing in your life. Do they align with the virtues of your life? And that's where I think a lot of people kind of misconstrue what the quarterly notes are for. And what I really find interesting is actually something I changed when it came to the quarterly notes. And essentially, you have 3 months within that quarter. You can do your monthly planning from a holistic standpoint within your quarterly notes, which is super cool. And I actually found a plugin that allowed me to do it called Sync Embed. So those of you who like Obsidian and like knowing about new plugins, it's a beta plugin that I found that's really interesting. And so basically what I did was, before you could do an embed of a certain note within a note, but you couldn't edit it. And basically it was just a viewable box. But I wanted to edit it. I basically, within the year, I wanted to plan out each month. It's very holistic. It's very like just one-liner per month, but it allowed me to do all 12 months in a row. And I found this plugin that allowed you to have that sync block that's actually editable like an actual note, which is super awesome. And so that holistic planning is what I'm referring to there. Even though it's not like real down in the gritty details, sometimes it's nice to just have that planning overarching within the year. And then when you're doing your quarterly notes, you can actually go in there and reference what you thought about on the yearly note. And I think that is kind of the key there. And so next, obviously, we have the monthly note. And the monthly note is literally just that, where every month you're like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what's happening in my neck of the woods, if you will. And actually, that's kind of what I do with my Now page updates. And so I recently was able to figure out a way to make my Now page updates connect with my calendar here. And essentially, all I had to do was change it to the format that the calendar's like. So instead of Now page update 71, blah, 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 I just have 2023-02 for February. And so when I click this, it'll bring me to my monthly note, which in turn has a private part, which is essentially just the planning aspect behind it, stuff I don't need to make public per se. I might eventually, but I don't need to. And then the public part, which is the Now page update, which is like, what am I doing? So the private part is literally just planning and kind of just jotting things down and thinking about like, what do I want to accomplish this month and go about enacting within the next few weeks. And then the public part is like, what have I been doing? So again, it kind of goes back to that review and preview. So the private part is a preview of what's going to happen. And the public part is just a review of what happened the last month. And I think that's kind of an interesting point to make, because a lot of people don't think about the past and future. They kind of get too much in the present, which is ironic because most people aren't usually in the present, ironically. So I digress. I'll stop yapping there. So next is the weekly note. And this is actually one where I fail tremendously at doing, but it's really interesting. If you can go ahead and do this, I wonder if I can actually just show you real quick. I'll click on the weekly note, and then let's do, can I do Commander, sync, and then we need day. So 2026. Nope, I did that. -02 today is the 7th, so 07. Let's do 05 because that's 0. Yeah, it's fine. And then I'm gonna make it real quick because I forgot to make it. And so within this, I also have this kind of cool little thing here. But that's my yearly notes. You go back to the weekly notes and you can press there, and now you can see it within the weekly notes. I'm not a big fan of how much space it takes up. I wish there was a way to kind of compress it down a little bit. But now I have that day within my weekly note. And, it didn't take too long for me to do. And you can actually just copy this little block and change the number. So if you want to copy this 7 times, paste it, boom, 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 change it from let's say 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which is this week. I guess today's the 10th. I don't know why I did 7. But yeah, and you can just copy that little block over and over and over again, change the number, and you can quickly do it. I don't have a way of doing it automatically yet, which is frustrating. I don't know why I can't get it to do that. But that is the way I'm approaching the weekly notes now. And so I can basically do that same thing I'm doing with the yearly and quarters. So planning out all 12 quarters within that yearly note, or not 12 quarters, 12 months in all 4 quarters within the yearly note. And then within the weekly note, I can plan out all of the different days. And I think that is something that's really interesting because, on Sundays, at the start of the week, you can just go in there, whatever your day is, your start of the week for you, go in there, you click the weekly note, and presumably, you actually could do part of it basically templated. You could do all the different blocks, and then instead of doing the 02, you could just do 2026 dash and just leave it blank, and then go in there, add the numbers. That might accelerate the way of doing it right now. Because right now, it is a beta plugin. You have to use Brad to install it. It's not necessarily the most intuitive as of yet. Excuse me. But I think you could accelerate that by just kind of finding loopholes around it, just to make it easier. So I'm going to share my screen here again. Now, finally, we have the daily notes. And daily notes you saw there are kind of interesting, right? I had this little query that basically tells me, like, okay, what happened if I have a note on the same day of a previous year, it'll pop up here. Obviously, I was not very productive last year, and I didn't have a yearly note or daily note for this day last year. But then you can go in there and click on it. It's kind of cool and kind of reference that. And then tasks for today, I am working on getting like a task aggregation plugin. I haven't really got around to doing it yet, but it is interesting to think about how you can start accumulating tasks on the daily notes. Logs are more so for like habit tracking and stacking. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like just writing down what happened. Technically speaking, I could write what I'm planning on doing in the morning here too. I just didn't have a section for it. But I think that this way of going about it is a pretty optimal basic format. If you go with some of the other templates out there, they might be a little bit more intuitive, or they might have certain, I would say, like properties. But the problem is I like working in the editor mode versus the reading mode, because the reading mode is the one you can actually go in there and choose the date kind of thing. And if you wanted to add another property or check off a check-in box, you could do it that way. But in writing modes, what I actually usually operate in, so it's kind of annoying to use properties. If you have a plugin for that, let me know. So going back here, so daily notes are basically just where you just operate to the best you can, right? I've been screwing myself over a lot lately and not getting enough done, but self-loathing on not being productive enough is not going to be helpful to most people, and really anybody. So being mad at myself for not being productive is not going to be useful to you or myself or anybody else. And so I'm making this video right now, right? And so you just got to operate to the best of your ability every day. And that 1% is there because when I was teaching swimming and personal training, all I ever cared about when I came to my clients was you getting 1% better in each session, right? Every time we meet, whether it's swimming or working out, just get 1% better. Maybe your grip strength gets better. Maybe your grip form gets better. Maybe your wrist gets straighter so you're doing curls more effectively. Maybe you lift a little bit heavier. Maybe you lift just a little bit faster or easier. And that 1% progress is what made me motivated to keep going forward as your trainer. I think that is a great mindset to have, because if you just worry yourself sick about trying to make 20% progress in a week, then you're not going to make any progress at all. But if you can get that 1% better every day, that is what's actually going to compound and snowball and start making more and more progress, which is why I planned content for every day of the year. Even though I know I might fail at getting 2 or 3 pieces done, I can at least try to get 1 piece done a day. And there's been a couple days, once this month and once last month, where I missed a day. But that's okay, because I've been working hard, and there's other days where I made up for it. It's okay. I'll move past it. It's frustrating, but you just got to operate the best you can, and that is key. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. And yeah, cheers.